pleasure to meet you.
How you doing?
I'm a big fan, as you
you.
might have guessed, and I love what you just said, that in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. And that went viral. That made you very famous. Why do you think that sparked such a reaction?
Well, because I think that what I was saying was self-evidently true, but not expressed very well very often. I mean, look, most of the time when you're discussing something that needs to be discussed, everybody's actually rather upset about it. You know, if you're actually talking about something important, right? Because why talk otherwise, unless you're just shooting the breeze? But if there's an issue at hand that has to be discussed, then people are already upset and they have different viewpoints. And the offensiveness in some sense is built into that. And you know that because if you have a family, if you have a wife, if you have an intimate relationship, and you're discussing something that's difficult, the probability that you're not going to offend each other if you're actually having the conversation is zero. And so you don't have to think unless you have a problem. And if you have a problem, then when you think, you're going to offend people. And so what, are we not going to think? That seems like a bad idea.
No, yeah. You're obviously not an American. We love to not think. but you know, I used to do a show called Politically Incorrect back in the 90s, and oh, thank you. Oh, the 90s, we remember them. And so I was always asked, what is your definition of political correctness? And I had to come up with one. I said, it's the elevation of sensitivity over truth, which seems like what it still is, except it's worse than ever.
It's more like the elevation of moral posturing about sensitivity over truth. It's even worse.
Yeah. So where did it come from? How did we get to this place where we're so fragile, the safe space people?
Oh, I think that you can pretty much blame it on the universities. I think that they've pursued, especially in the humanities and in the social sciences as well, they've pursued a policy of a radical leftist policy with an overlay of postmodernism, which kind of a literary criticism approach that's produced all of this. As far as I can tell, I think you can lay a lot of it at the feet of faculties like the faculties of education. There was an article in the Chronicle of Higher Education this week that just devastated the faculties of education, taking them to task for low academic standards and for possession by ideology and for basically indoctrinating people in a cult-like manner and playing identity politics and group identity. And
no free speech. They don't seem to... There was an incident in Fresno State. I don't know if you saw this, but Barbara Bush died. Okay, some professor there tweeted something nasty.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have tweeted it. She called Barbara Bush a racist and said she raised war criminals. Okay, you know, it's...
Yeah, well, the timing...
This crowd likes it, but I mean, it's nasty, and they're considering suspending her. And here's what the president of the university said. He said, this was beyond free speech. This was disrespectful. Have we lost the thread back to knowing what free speech is? Yes, it can be disrespectful. That is covered under free speech. President of Fresno, you idiot. Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Well, and you see this too. I think where it's manifesting itself in a particularly appalling manner is in the increasing unwillingness of comedians, for example, to go on university campuses to be funny. And when comedians start...
I'm one of them.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, fuck them. I'm not gonna... I call these people emotional hemophiliacs. You know, it's like the least little thing will make them start to bleed. But it makes me mad because their answer is not to go into a room full of sharp objects. The answer is to make all of us wear bubble wrap.
Yeah, right.
So nothing we ever do makes them have a moment of discomfort.
Well, there's also
very narcissistic.
Well, there's also this idea that's promoted by the people who are protecting those who are easily offended, that the way to make people secure is to protect them from things that they don't want to encounter. And there isn't a clinician, like I'm a trained clinical psychologist, and there isn't a clinician in the country who's worth his or her salt that would ever make that claim. Because you don't make people, first of all, it's hard to make people safe because life is seriously not safe.
Yes.
And the way that you make people resilient is by exposing them to things that they're afraid of and that make them uncomfortable voluntarily, but you use exposure.
Right.
And And so, like, if you over coddle people, if you protect them from everything that's sharp, you make them dull and stupid and narcissistic, and it's a really bad idea.
So you do know America.
Good.
One thing I mean, your book is fantastic, and one of the rules that I really love is you say, don't let your kids do anything that would make you not like them. That's what I've been thinking for years when I call them the fuck you mom generation. When I see kids, never in life because I never go near a child, but like on TV and movies, I see kids like saying fuck you mom. And I'm like, if somebody who wasn't your child did that, you'd be immensely offended, whereas the parents just take it. What's up with that?
Well, people don't like to admit that they can dislike their children or children in general, and right.
No, I know what you mean. And
but they can.
No, they totally can.
One of the things you see very commonly as a clinical psychologist is family members who hate each other, and who it's like they have their hands around each other's necks for 20 years and are squeezing very slowly, trying to strangle each other. And you see parents who clearly detest their children and have ever since they were born. And part of that, I know it's a terrible way of looking at things, but it's true.
It's so true.
And one of the things,
No, parents confide that in me because I don't have kids.
Yeah, well,
No.
that makes it safe.
They do.
But
no, but they say things like, yeah, I love my kids, but if I had to do it over again, I wouldn't.
Yeah, well, okay.
Like, well, don't tell the kid that.
Well, but that's so bad. Look,
it is so bad.
So bad, because the thing is about little kids is that little kids have a wonderful element to them. And most people spontaneously like little kids, they'll give them a chance. And if you have little kids, one of the things that's so wonderful about it is that when you bring them out into the world, even people who aren't in good shape, rough people, and who maybe don't have much patience for humanity, it brings out the best in them, you know? And so people are willing to give your kids a chance. But then if they misbehave, especially if they're rude and they don't have any respect and they're whiny and they don't know how to listen, then people don't like your kids and you don't. And then your kids go out into a world where no one likes them. And that's what you, do to your kids if you don't like them, is you send them out into that world.
But how did parents get so pussy whipped? By their own children. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, it's like they act the way a guy acts when he's super sprung on some chick and just lets her walk all over him, and whatever she does, he puts up with. I don't get how we got to that place.
I think parents are afraid of exercising authority because they tend to think that authority will crush the creative spirit of their child.
Oh, fuck.
Well, that is... yeah.
Okay. No, I see, everything this man says, I think is common sense.
You guys should have a baby together.
Yeah, we should have a baby together. It's like we get crucified for what we say. I don't think anything we say is controversial at all.
It's hard.
Do you think he's controversial?
It's hard. I just had a kid. It's hard figuring it out. And by the way, everyone is neurotic. That's why we have a hard time raising children the right way, because we live in the most neurotic, insane, overconnected, crazy world.
Yes.
Donald Trump is our president.
Right,
How
I know.
are we expected to raise normal children?
I know.
It's a crazy time, Bill.
Oh, okay.
You haven't talked about social media. Social media is a huge part of this. I mean, it abets the narcissism. It has everyone preening for everybody else. It has people going into their little tribal places and sorting themselves that way. That's a huge problem here, too, I think.
Well, there's other...
Yeah.
There's other factors that are contributing to overprotection, I think, that can't be laid directly at parents' feet. I mean, we have fewer children, so they're more special. They're not raised so much by their siblings, right? And people have them when they're older, and so they're much more careful with their kids in some sense. And that's a bad thing in some ways, because you want your children to be free enough to go out in the world and learn some resiliency. You don't want to be hovering over them all the time. And if you're a young parent and you have many kids, then you kind of get outnumbered by your kids, and they're going to go and do their thing. And so some of it's demographic and some of it's attitudinal. And you know, maybe that's a consequence of the pill and the fact that we've restricted.
Let's get rid of that.
No, I didn't say we should get rid of it, but it's really thrown like the fact that we have effective birth control means that families are much smaller. It means that children are much more precious, and that means that they tend to be overprotected. It has nothing to do with abolishing the pill. It's it's a way of analyzing the complex conflict.
Well, as a father of 3 sons and 3 grandsons, I just want to say...
And where are they, in Washington?
Kids, they're in Washington State.
Is that a good place to live?
Yeah, one was conceived in Hawaii, but that's okay. That's another story. So, the kids are not the problem here. The kids get climate change. The kids get gay marriage. The kids get legalization of marijuana. The kids get saying we should step on Donald Trump every chance we get. The kids are not. The kids are just fine. They're the smartest generation.
But you know what the kids also get? That you can call social services if your parent does anything you don't like.
Kids don't have
That's
to.
one reason parents are not rough with their kids. I don't mean physically rough. I mean in any way rough, because kids do know that they can do that.
The only problem with kids is they don't vote. That's the only problem with kids. And if you got a kid out there, tell them to vote next November. We got to get them to vote.
If the price that we have to pay for children having some insurance against abuse is kids who are overly politically correct, I'll take the trade-off. Yeah.
I don't really think that that's
kind of a lousy applause for that, Alex. I don't know if that was all that popular.
I'm not saying it for the applause,
Okay.
Bill.
I don't think it protects children from abuse at all, that sort of thing, because social services and the government provision of protection for children is not a very effective way of preventing children, or preventing abuse of children. What's effective, and this is something you'll want to know as a parent, is that you have every right to intervene in your child's life when they're misbehaving in a way that actually impinges on you in a serious manner, because you're going to want to like your kid, and that means you have to come to a real negotiation with them about what their space is and what your space is. And you have to be able to take the right to yourself to put those limitations on them. And you're going to find that that's a very difficult right to take, because you're going to be doubtful about your authority. And that'll allow your child to run roughshod over you, and you won't like them as a consequence.
You know me so well for someone who's never actually met me. But thank you.
Ooh. See, everywhere you go, you cause trouble, Professor.
Yeah, well.
Okay, Michael, will you ever release the contents of the warning shot disc of evidence you tweeted about? Oh, yeah.
Possibly. It depends on how the case progresses. I mean, you know, we
What's on it?
well, we took that picture and we tweeted it out, and it was exactly that. It was a warning shot to Michael Cohen, the president, that if they tried to claim that my client was a liar after 60 minutes, there was going to be consequences, and it worked. And it worked perfectly, because we heard nothing from them. So we have the DVD, and we're going to release it when and if it's necessary, and we're going to see what happens with the case. But make no mistake about it, it's locked and loaded.
Can I ask a, can I ask an outsider question about this?
Yes,
I mean,
please.
I've been listening to all of this about Trump and watching how these conversations go in the U.S. And I have one question about it. I mean, there's all these people in the U.S. who are on the conservative side who are aligned with Trump for all sorts of reasons. And there's all this tension around his presidency and attempts to pull him out of his office for various reasons. And what do you think will happen if that comes to pass? What do you think will happen to these people that have identified with Trump? And like, how is it that Democratic types, for example, are holding out their hand to say to these conservative types, sort of like, welcome back into the fold? Because it looks to me, from an outsider's perspective, that your country is polarizing in a way that's not good, and that, you know, people are going after Trump. And I understand that. It's not like I don't understand that, but there's all these people that elected him and that are identified with him, and they're not taking this well, you know. And so, well, they're not. It's not. And you know, you might not think they're very bright and all of that, and you know, they're backwards and all of those things. But you know, you need to have respect for the rest of your citizens, and if your country isn't going to pull itself apart. And I really see this happening from an outsider's perspective when I come down here. And I lived in the States for a while, and it wasn't like this before.
If he was just a regular Republican president with Republican policies, I would say you'd have a point. But what is so alarming is the assault on democratic norms, what we were talking about here today. Things like threatening to put people in jail, threatening to put journalists in jail, wanting military parades, praising dictators, wanting to be a dictator. I mean, We are at a moment here. I try to impress on the people who are too young to remember a lot of presidents and a lot of elections, how incredibly different this is than anything that ever came before. I never much liked the other Republicans who were in office, but I have a renewed respect for them. George Bush and Mitt Romney would not have tried to pull this shit. They just wouldn't.
What about Nixon?
Nixon got caught, and he gave himself up, basically.
Well, although this president makes the Watergate burglars look brilliant.
Right.
Well, but it seems to me that it's not.
Point. We can be as tough as we're being on the president. I think we should, for all the reasons you just said, Bill, without telling his supporters that they're stupid, without saying basket of deplorables. If we want to bring them around to what I would say is a more enlightened kind of thinking, and if we want them to see Donald Trump as someone who's turned the presidency into one long infomercial for Mar-a-Lago, you know, we can do that without saying to them, you've been duped, you're chumps, you're dumb, you're deplorable. And I think we need to talk to them with more generosity than we do.
I'm confused about how this dovetails with your thesis that the left is too preoccupied with being non-confrontational. Right?
The left is too preoccupied
just that
with
we
being,
are.
that is
That's
definitely
interesting.
not
Okay,
right.
no, all right.
No, that's
I'm
a good
paraphrasing,
question.
But the idea that liberals, especially intellectuals, are preoccupied with politically correct speech, that they're
Oh,
not.
I see. What,
and yet.
no, they're too preoccupied with identity politics by a large margin, and they tend to categorize everyone by their ethnicity and their sex and their gender. And I think all that does is turn people into tribal actors, and that the end result of that is catastrophe.
But weren't you also saying, though, that the left is too worried about offending people?
I think that goes along with...
I will.
Yes,
Right.
yes. Well, that goes...
But then on the other hand, when the left, for example, offends people in the political sphere, you're questioning whether that's somehow bad for society writ large.
Well, I'm concerned about. I think that those two issues are. I think that those two issues are somewhat separate. I'm concerned about the dialogue in the United States around the presidency, pulling people farther and farther apart. It has nothing to do with the behavior of Trump. I think this is an independent issue. You can say positive or negative things about Trump as you might.
But he's only there because they support him. You see,
I know.
mean, that's the thing.
But that's the issue. That's the issue. Is they did support him, and
without the circus, he's just a lonely clown.
Yeah.
But he has these people in Congress who are enablers, and this base that it is a cult of personality, not unlike dictatorships we've seen in the past. I mean, he said once, famously, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and not lose any fans.
Yes.
And he has proved that to be almost true. I mean, we cannot imagine what he would do where they would turn on him, because I don't know what that would be. I don't think it's anything, because whatever it was, he would just say, well, it's fake news.
But okay, so imagine he's impeached, just for the sake of argument.
Impeach or convicted.
Okay, either of those. But it seems to me...
Well, that matters. One, he has to leave.
Yeah, no, it's not an unimportant detail, but it still seems to me that it leaves you with the problem of what do you do with the disaffected 40% that are going to be very unhappy about this, independent of Trump's behavior.
Kind of like the Sunnis after we kicked over Saddam.
Well, that's a hell of a precedent
ISIS.
to cite.
Yes,
right.
That's what I worry about.
Let me
Trump
suggest
support.
that this is an argument, looking for an argument rather than a solution. We're not waiting for impeachment. We're making sure that people understand Donald Trump cannot stop us today. Donald Trump could not stop me from the first net neutrality bill to make sure people have access to the internet. He could not stop us from doing that. He cannot stop us. He cannot stop us from acting on climate change with all this bloviating saying it's just a hoax. He can't stop us from fighting climate change. He can't stop us from having the best paid family leave and sick leave policy. He can't stop us. When we demonstrate people progress in our states.
Washington State.
No. But he certainly,
no one
That's
can
an
stop us from boosting
he certainly is
Washington State.
stopping us from protecting the environment. He has signed executive orders, right? The first thing he did in office was to sign an order that said, hey, you want to dump your coal sludge in the streams? Go right ahead. The head of the EPA is Scott Pruitt. He's reversed all of
No, he just changed it to the Environmental Pollutants Association.
I know, but just to say he can't stop us.
And he's changed the tax landscape everywhere.
Absolutely.
I mean, you can't do anything in your state.
And he's
to do away with,
he's appointing crazy judges left and right.
So here's the
he's
good news.
changing things as we speak.
we're
We
not
don't
talking-
cover it because of Stormy Daniels, but all of this is going on. What can I say? He's okay.
Get used to it.
Okay. All right. We didn't get to any questions, but it was a wonderful panel.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.